Ramadan Mubarak, everybody. Elmo loves you. Hamas will never win over the righteous keepers of the West, you scum! Elmo! The West will not kneel to you! When people talk about the West emerging as a broad but distinct cultural sphere to the Near East, they often point to Greece's wars against Persia, particularly the famous Battle of Thermopylae. This battle was famously captured in Zack Snyder's erotic thriller, Meet the Spartans. The argument goes that Greece, in their wars with Persia, would preserve a cultural and political divide between the East and West. I would argue, however, that Persia would never have advanced deeper into Europe. The Serbians would clearly have stolen all of their chariots and sold them for Adidas tracksuits. Today, we are going to discuss another war, which would cement a division between the righteous West, heirs to Hyperborea, and the lame-ass East. And sure, you know, Eastern civilization is really the cradle of civilization itself, but these civilizations are real, and therefore lame and gay. But the war we are discussing today did not stop the East from dominating the West, but rather, if we were to take propaganda at face value, stopped the East from seducing the West. The Battle of Actium was a struggle for the heart of the Roman Empire over whether its center of gravity would lie in the East or West. Since Europe was the child of the imperial Rome which emerged from this battle, the struggle was indeed a hinge of history. This is something of a sequel to my last video, where I discussed Roman attitudes towards Egypt, and to briefly summarize, the Romans had something of an inferiority complex when it came to Egypt. While, on one hand, they greatly admired the age and scale of Egyptian architecture, this fed into their insecurities they had with the broader East. The East was where civilization had arisen long before it ever touched the shores of Italy. And even after the East was conquered by Rome, it would remain exceedingly wealthy and populous. It was this insecurity which would define the rise of the first emperor of Rome, Caesar Augustus, or to use his birth name, which we will use for the rest of this video, Octavian. This is a story about how Octavian leveraged Roman stereotypes about the East and Egypt in order to destroy his enemies and build his empire atop the ruins of the once great Roman Republic. What I've struggled with in this video is, how much detail do I give you? The fact is that I was, just a gaming YouTuber for quite some years, and it's sort of difficult to figure out how many of y'all are here for history and how many of you therefore already know a good deal of history, and how many of you are just the indigenous gamers of my audience. This is not an all-encompassing view of the fall of the Roman Republic. I have sort of just covered it piecemeal over the years, and what I'm going to do here is focus specifically on Octavian's propaganda war against Antony and how he leveraged anti-Egyptian sentiment to seize power. But we should get you up to speed. The tyrant Julius Caesar has been assassinated on the floor of Pompey's theater. Upon the reading of Caesar's will, he posthumously adopts his grandnephew, Octavian, bestowing upon him his ample riches and the greatest prize of all, the name of Caesar. Madness and greed have gripped the eternal city as the republic which she so treasured crumbles to dust beneath the weight of greed. The very ambition that spurned Rome to conquer the world has rotted its institutions, led to rampant wealth inequality and increasing levels of political violence. A republic of free men has rapidly deteriorated into a nation of slaves and masters. Possessed by perverse ambition, brother fights brother over the land their fathers conquered. Caesar's most trusted ally, Marc Antony, fights a brief war with Octavian over Rome before they set aside their differences to avenge the fallen Caesar against his assassins. In the aftermath of Antony and Octavian's victory, a delicate peace settled over a bleeding republic. These are the last days of the Roman Republic. Lepidus doesn't matter. I'm not going to talk about him again. Lepidus certainly has been recorded in the annals of history, but he just doesn't matter. Me, however, I will not be recorded in the annals of history, you see, because I am a shadow on the wall, an untouchable illusion dancing across existence with grace and subtlety, which cannot be detected with human senses. You see, I use Surfshark VPN.
Do you want to go down in history? Considering that you're currently watching this video at work, you piece of shit, you certainly don't. Sure, Alexander the Great's accomplishments have been lauded for centuries, but he was also criticized at length for living like a Persian king by catty Greek historians. With Surfshark VPN, you can maintain your privacy and avoid being written about by snarky historians, who will absolutely record every single word you've ever Googled the definition of, you idiot. And privacy is but one of the many benefits of using Surfshark. Did you know that companies track your browsing so that they can alter the prices of goods on the fly? That's right. The more time you spend looking for a flight to a nation with a non-extradition treaty to the US, the more the company will increase their prices. Spit in the face of Silicon Valley ghouls trying to min-max their access to your wallet. Go to surfshark.com/DJPeach. With the ability to connect from unlimited devices, over 3,200 servers in 100 countries, and 24/7 customer support, Surfshark is committed to protecting your privacy and helping you circumvent censored content. While I was stationed in Turkey, I used Surfshark to be able to still access Wikipedia and feed my crippling addiction to it. With a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk at all. Go to surfshark.com/DJPeach to get security for yourself and your devices. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this video.
As these vultures argued over who got the juiciest bits of Rome, some territories would change hands, but those sort of details, it's not really necessary for what we're talking about here. Octavian west, Antony east, Lepidus eating his boogers in Africa. This was a delicate peace. The two men in this story who did matter did not like each other. Marc Antony was pissed. He'd lived his life always supporting Caesar. He'd been his firm right-hand man in military campaigns, and then, upon Caesar's death, some 18-year-old grandnephew gets all of Caesar's money and his name. And from Octavian's perspective, well, Octavian did not share. But Rome had been torn apart by war for a while by this point. War in Gaul, oh, that's awesome. Romans love that shit. But Romans killing Romans? There's not much money in that, or honor in that. For decades, small-scale political violence and large-scale civil war had torn the Roman Republic apart. These people had no more appetite for killing each other, while there were lots of other people who deserved murder way more, and had shit to steal. Octavian, Antony, and that third guy whose name I already forgot, formed what we call the Second Triumvirate. And the early years of this new partnership were spent with everyone involved just sorta off and doing their own thing, dealing with their own separate issues. Marc Antony planned to execute on Caesar's plan of invading Parthia, which he was going to do right before he got perforated by those fuckboys. Antony's reasons for doing this were diverse, its conquest is just rad as fuck, and Crassus, who was Caesar's ally, had been killed there, and his Roman eagle, which was the Roman standard they carried around and was of great symbolic and moral importance, had been taken by the treacherous Parthians. Now, how were the Parthians treacherous, you ask? Well, that's very simple. They kept running around on their horses, shooting arrows, like, stand there and get stabbed like a goddamn man. Octavian, on his end, had to deal with the pirate king of the Mediterranean. So Marc Antony went touring the east, raising funds and making plans for his eventual invasion of Parthia. While in the city of Tarsus, he summoned an old flame of Caesar's, the queen of the wealthiest independent kingdom left in the Mediterranean, Cleopatra. Well, the two had almost definitely met before. The fact is that Cleopatra's entrance at Tarsus was the most girl boss moment in all of recorded history. A servant of Rome, a mere vassal and puppet queen, did not appear before Marc Antony. A goddess appeared before Marc Antony. She came sailing up the river Cydnus in a barge with gilded stern and outspread sails of purple, while oars of silver beat time to the music of flutes and fifes and harps. She herself lay all along, under a canopy of cloth of gold, dressed as Venus in a picture, and beautiful young boys, like painted cupids, stood on each side to fan her. Her maids were dressed like sea nymphs and graces, some steering at the rudder, some working at the ropes. The perfumes diffused themselves from the vessel to the shore, which was covered with multitudes, part following the galley up the river on either bank, part running out of the city to see the sight.
Holy shit, is that a Challenger? Yep, got the scat pack, heated seats, satellite radio. Well, I can see through your shallow seductions, temptress. I'm a decent Roman. I like eating dirt, and I cannot read. I've no taste for your decadent luxuries. Do you consider these good things? Yes. Oh, well, I guess I'll have to get fucked up on margaritas and coke, then do donuts in this thing alone, I guess. I've been convinced to abandon my nation forever.
The propaganda of Octavian has presented Marc Antony as, well, a party boy, an undisciplined, foolish, immature man who'd be seduced by Cleopatra into becoming her soft, decadent manservant. Propaganda is usually based on some level of truth. Marc Antony was probably a lush. He probably was something of a party animal. But when you remove the spin, he was very clearly an excellent military commander. You know, that's sort of beyond question. Everyone gives him that. But he was also a really shrewd diplomat. This is all my personal take, obviously. My personal take has never been that Marc Antony was a genuine, just fucking idiot. You can see just from his actions that he knew what he was fucking doing. Every decision that he made was good on paper. But Octavian wiped his ass with that paper. Maybe he rode a chariot pulled by lions. Ruling the Roman East and allying himself with Cleopatra would be used by Octavian most effectively. I told you that the Roman people were sick and tired of fighting other Romans. But what if Marc Antony wasn't Roman?
Agrippa, I would like to thank you for joining me in my scheming closet this evening. Thank you, sir. It is an honor to smell your breath. We must plan on how to destroy Marc Antony. He's got money. He's got both popular and patrician support. He's got experience and the love and loyalty of his troops. What do I have? Halitosis, sir. Yes, and a hot sister? Yeah, that might come in handy later. But Rome, you son of a bitch. We have Rome. We have our ears to the streets. We can sway the public far more effectively. And how do we do that? We're a prideful people, anxious about the ancient and influential East, unwilling to accept anything even approaching an insult by a foreigner. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I'm thinking about your hot sister, sir. Yeah, I can tell. It's a very small closet, Agrippa.
What if Marc Antony was Egyptian? What if he was Eastern? What if Octavian, the man who would become the first emperor of Rome, was such an effective schemer that he turned a civil war into a foreign one? Here, Octavian, as the ruler of the West, had a crucial advantage. Both he and Antony were Roman, but only he had Rome. Octavian's propaganda treated Cleopatra in a bigoted manner. When referring to the queen, he rolled out the various Greco-Roman stereotypes of Eastern decadence. Eunuchs, gilded couches, drunkenness, madness, and effeminacy. He accused her of corrupting Antony, who allegedly adopted such alien, barbaric, and effeminate customs as donning purple clothes, wearing a Persian short sword instead of the good Roman gladius, and even sleeping under mosquito netting. Octavian called her an Egyptian, while conveniently omitting her descent from one of Alexander the Great's Macedonian marshals. As Antony and Cleopatra's sexy political and military alliance matured, Antony went to the city of Brundisium to negotiate some finer details of tyranny with Octavian. While there, the two men decided to formalize their alliance via marriage, with Antony marrying the conveniently named Octavia, who is Octavian's hot sister. Once again, this is a great decision, you fucking idiot. Why would you do this? There are two ways in which Antony's marriage to Octavia would prove to hurt him. The first, he wouldn't stop banging Cleopatra, lending Octavian an easy PR win, as Antony abandoned the proud and modest Roman woman for the seductive Egyptian whore. The second is a little less concrete, but I think it's worth mentioning. Marc Antony had been lured on by his deals with Octavian and his marriage with Octavia, and paid by his death, this penalty of a treacherous alliance. Octavia would act as a negotiator between her brother and her husband, and considering Antony's treatment of her, we can very well speculate, as Tacitus did here, that she worked on her brother's behalf more than Antony's. Plutarch, however, claims that Octavia did attempt to keep the peace between her brother and husband. "I shall be miserable," said Octavia, "without redress, for on what side soever victory falls, I shall be sure to be a loser." All the same, Antony would in time send his hot wife back to Rome so he could party it up with Cleopatra in Athens. In general, it's difficult to ascertain just how hard they partied throughout their long relationship, but Octavian, and as a consequence, chroniclers much later, would record the most decadent and lavish feasts. At this point, I wish to relate an absolutely true story. Plutarch recounts that in the kitchens of Cleopatra's palace one evening, 8 boars were kept roasting over open fires non-stop. Not for some great banquet, it was actually for a very small dinner, but whenever Antony decided to eat, he wanted it hot and ready, and Little Caesars had yet to be invented. The boars had all began cooking at different times, you understand. So whichever ones were not perfectly cooked, the moment that Antony got snacky, were thrown away. Plutarch was writing 100 years after the fact. But don't worry, he cites his sources. This information comes from a physician who was friends with Plutarch's grandfather. Sources cited: some guy my grandpa knew. In time, Cleopatra would bear Antony twins, a boy and girl which were ostentatiously named the Sun and Moon. Antony first met his new children on the eve of his long-planned invasion of Parthia, which he lost badly.
Greetings, Antony. It is I, staunch ally of Rome, who you can definitely trust, Artavasdes, King of Armenia. I hope you are a reasonable man. Certainly, I barely ever ride chariots pulled by lions. Why do you ask? Well, you are not the first Roman to invade Parthia. Not long ago, as I'm sure you know, Caesar's ally Crassus attempted the same. Oh yeah, I think I saw a YouTube video about that. Well, if you paid attention, you may have noticed that Crassus invaded through their relatively flat and open western border. I see, and how did that work out for him? He led his men into one of the most brutal losses the Roman military would ever experience. His son's severed head was waved in his face, and then molten gold was poured down his throat. You see, I offered Crassus support. I implored him, with my most wise counsel, to invade from the north, by way of my proud kingdom of Armenia. Of course, he refused. When I asked him why he would turn down the provisions and cavalry and safe passage I offered, he simply replied, "Because I'm a dick like that." I implore you, do not make the same mistake. Accept my offer of support and safe passage, and together we will crush Parthia. Aha! I have betrayed you, you fool! Why, Artavasdes, why would you betray me? We lost one battle.
Antony's retreat would go down in history as one of the most brutal failures in Roman military history. Disease and Parthian arrows utterly crippled Antony's army. According to Plutarch, he lost 20,000 men and 4,000 cavalry. After his retreat, Antony would open negotiations with Artavasdes and treacherously capture him. He would then, in a really stupid display, parade him through the streets of Alexandria. He would hold a Roman triumph in a foreign city. This attempt to save face only damaged his reputation among Romans. Holding a triumphal parade in Alexandria and presenting to Cleopatra a conquered foe was an insult to the eternal city. Antony's mounting failures were made only more pronounced by Octavian's successes. He, or to put it more accurately, his right-hand man Agrippa, put down Sextus Pompey and even conquered Illyria. Octavian, despite presenting himself as a real safeguard of traditional Roman values, wasn't much of a military leader, and that being a great military leader was considered a great Roman virtue. And Octavian continued to punish Antony, and the weak point in every Roman's armor was dick. They wore skirts. Octavian by this point ruled the Senate in all but name. Through this power, he bestowed upon his sister hitherto unheard-of privileges for a Roman woman. A statue was erected in her honor. She was declared sacrosanct, which is to say, harm to her was legally considered harm against the state itself. She was even allowed to own and sell her own property. Pretty libtarded of Octavian to do this, but it was a master stroke. Remember, it is okay to give women rights if it helps you dominate and humiliate your enemies. The more honored Octavia became, the more Antony's dishonoring of her became an insult not only to her, but to Rome itself. But the most damning propaganda against Antony, and indeed the most likely to be false, came when Octavian raided the temple of Vesta, where Roman wills were kept, and publicized Antony's intentions upon his death. He was to be buried next to Cleopatra, and their twin children would split the Roman East between each other. This will of Antony, if true, would mean that Antony now thought that Roman territory was like his own personal private property, and he could just dispense it as he wished. Antony had become, for all intents and purposes, at least to hear Octavian's telling of it, an Eastern king. War against Antony was no longer a war against a Roman. It was a war against an Eastern tyrant. In 32 BC, the growing divide between the two men finally erupted into all-out war. The Battle of Actium would prove to be the decisive moment in the war between Antony and Octavian. This is the speech that Cassius Dio recorded Octavian giving before the Battle of Actium. While it is certainly not, strictly speaking, accurate, we can be certain that a speech like it was absolutely given before the battle. It hits every note that Octavian hit in his propaganda. Me being me, I've dumbed it down a little and added in some jokes. I encourage you to read the original text, which I have linked in the description. This is from Book 50, sections 24 through 27 of Cassius Dio's History of Rome. In this speech is the stuff that kills liberty: fear, ambition, and that most vile of poisons, flattery.
Wow, what a great bunch of guys we got here. Never before have I seen so many bloodthirsty men in skirts. Any betting man would pick us to win out here. We're the clear choice. We're well rested and outnumber the enemy who've been bleeding support for some time now. But that's not why we're going to win. We're going to win because that is what we do. We have ground the old world into dust and built ours atop it. We've brought the world to our feet from whence it serves us. And now, will we serve a woman? No, never. Girls are gross. A woman who worships reptiles and birds. A woman whose people embalm their dead as if they could live forever. What they call religion is nothing more than madness. What they call government is nothing more than a decadent whore, with scheming eunuchs whispering in her ear, and how they have seduced our Antony. There was a time when he was my partner. I even married him to my sweet, innocent sister.
She's hot.
Okay. There was a time when we were friends, but he has been bewitched by the foreign queen and her luxuries. He has gone soft and mad just like them. Let no man call him a Roman, but rather an Egyptian.
In the aftermath of Octavian's victory, he would have himself be awarded numerous honors and powers. He would gut the established rules of the Republic, finally and forever. And on its corpse he built his empire. What is the foundation upon which tyranny is built? Is it built on unspeakable displays of violence? Is it built on fear? Well, it's built on a lot of things. But in this story, we see a critical ingredient that I don't think is often enough discussed. Is a tyrant's greatest weapon not the sword, but flattery? Could it be that tyranny is nothing more than the exact sort of lie that you want to believe? Thanks for watching.